David Berkowitz, son of Sam. David Berkowitz, infamously known as the Son of Sam, was an American serial killer who terrorized New York City during the mid-1970s. Born on June 1, 1953 in Brooklyn, New York, Berkowitz was adopted by a middle-class Jewish family. His childhood was marked by feelings of abandonment and anger after learning of his adoption, and the death of his adoptive mother. He became withdrawn and socially isolated, and by his teenage years, he exhibited troubling behavioral issues, including pyromania and animal cruelty. Between 1976 and 1977, he launched a killing spree that left 6 people dead and 7 others wounded. He would target young couples sitting in parked cars, primarily using a .44 caliber revolver to shoot his victims. Berkowitz's attacks created widespread fear throughout the city, as they appeared random and senseless. He taunted police and the media with cryptic letters signed "The Son of Sam," claiming to be driven by a demonic force that spoke to him through his neighbor's dog. His motivations were rooted in his delusional beliefs, and he claimed to be under the influence of satanic forces. His actions and bizarre letters sparked a media frenzy, and many in the city lived in fear during the height of his killing spree. Despite a massive manhunt, Berkowitz remained elusive until he received a parking ticket near one of the crime scenes. This led to his arrest in August 1977. He quickly confessed to the shootings, stating that a demon named Sam had commanded him to kill. He was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences. During his imprisonment, Berkowitz claimed to have found religion, renouncing his earlier beliefs and now instead referring to himself as the Son of Hope. Despite his supposed transformation, Berkowitz remained in prison where he continues to serve his sentence. Dennis Rader, BTK killer. Dennis Rader was born on March 9, 1945 in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and he became infamously known as the BTK killer, which stands for Bind, Torture, and Kill, later in his life. During his childhood, his family life was seemingly ordinary. However, he exhibited disturbing behavior from an early age, including a fascination with bondage and a tendency to kill small animals. These early signs of psychopathy were masked by his otherwise normal life. Rader held jobs as a compliance officer and security alarm installer, and he was also active in his church, even serving as its president at one point. He also had a family, appearing to live a typical suburban lifestyle. Eventually, he started killing people between the years 1974 to 1991, terrorizing Wichita, Kansas, by committing heinous crimes involving binding, torturing, and murdering his victims. Rader's reign of terror lasted over 17 years, during which he had killed 10 people, including men, women, and children. His crimes were especially horrifying due to their premeditated nature and the cruelty with which he carried them out. His motivations stemmed from his sadistic fantasies and need for power and control. He craved attention and would taunt law enforcement with letters and cryptic messages that detailed his crimes. He loved the fear that he instilled in the community, and also how he was able to stay anonymous for such a long time, feeding his ego. Rader was finally apprehended in 2005 when he resumed sending taunting letters to the police. He made the mistake of sending a floppy disk, which authorities were able to trace back to his church computer. He was arrested, confessed to his crimes, and in 2005 was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. Rader's case is one of the most notorious in American criminal history, showcasing the terrifying potential of a killer hiding in plain sight. The Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer, like Jack the Ripper, is another elusive serial killer whose identity is still unknown to this day. They are known for a series of brutal murders that took place in Northern California during the late 1960s and early 1970s. The killer is officially linked to at least 5 murders, though they claim to have killed 37 people in taunting letters sent to newspapers. The Zodiac's crimes began in December 1968 with the murder of two teenagers near Vallejo, California. Over the next several years, he would strike again, targeting young couples in secluded areas. His methods included shooting and stabbing victims, sometimes even attacking in broad daylight. The cryptic letters and ciphers he sent to local newspapers led to him gaining notoriety. In these letters, he boasted about his crimes and mocked law enforcement's inability to catch him. The letters were filled with symbols, threats, and codes, with one famously containing a 48-character cipher that the Zodiac claimed would reveal his identity. Despite numerous attempts to crack his codes, the mystery surrounding him and his identity still continues. The Zodiac Killer's motivations remain unclear, but he appeared to be driven by a desire for attention, power, and control. His use of media to communicate with the public and law enforcement was highly unusual and suggested that he enjoyed the fear and chaos he instigated. He displayed a calculated, almost theatrical cruelty that made him a figure of terror during his active years. Despite a massive investigation and numerous suspects over the years, he was unfortunately never caught. His last confirmed communication was in 1974, and no new credible leads have emerged since. The Zodiac Killer remains a haunting figure in human history, with theories and investigations surrounding him and his crimes continuing to this day. H. Holmes. H. Holmes, born Herman Webster Mudgett on May 16, 1861, is considered one of America's first known serial killers. Raised in Gilmanton, New Hampshire, Holmes had a troubled childhood with a strict father. He developed an early fascination with death, reportedly dissecting animals. Intelligent and manipulative, traits he carried throughout his life, he attended medical school at the University of Michigan, gaining knowledge that would later aid him in his criminal activities. After moving to Chicago in the late 1880s, Holmes adopted his new alias and embarked on a career of various schemes. His most infamous venture was the construction of a 3-story building which became known as the Murder Castle. The building was designed with hidden rooms, secret passageways, soundproof chambers, and a disorienting layout, making it an ideal site for trapping and killing his victims. Holmes lured guests, particularly young women, to the hotel where he would torture and murder them, often using gas chambers or suffocation. He would then dispose of the bodies by dissecting them and selling their skeletons to medical schools. Holmes's criminal activities extended beyond the Murder Castle. He also committed insurance fraud, murdering multiple business partners and acquaintances for financial gain during these schemes. He was ultimately captured after a failed insurance scheme involving his associate, Benjamin Peitzel, whom Holmes had killed. Arrested in 1894, the investigation revealed the extent of his murders. He confessed to 27 killings, though the true number could be even higher. Holmes was convicted of murder and sentenced to death, hanged on May 7, 1896 in Philadelphia, ending the life of one of America's most notorious serial killers, Pedro Alonso Lopez. Pedro Alonso Lopez, known as the Monster of the Andes, was one of the most prolific serial killers in recorded history. Born in 1948 in Colombia, Lopez's childhood was marked by extreme poverty, abuse, and trauma. His mother, a prostitute, allegedly kicked him out of their home at 8 years old after catching him molesting his younger sister. Lopez then lived life on the streets, where he was repeatedly sexually abused, and this early trauma likely contributed to his later crimes. As a young adult, he was arrested for car theft and spent several years in prison, where he claims he was gang raped. Upon release, Lopez began his killing spree. His victims were primarily young girls, typically between 9 to 12 years old. He would lure them away from busy markets or streets, then rape and strangle them. He claimed to have murdered over 300 girls across Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador throughout the 1970s and early 1980s. Lopez's motives seemed to stem from a deep-seated hatred of women, likely rooted in his childhood experiences. He reportedly believed he was cleaning up society by killing young girls before they could become prostitutes, like his mother. In 1980, Lopez was caught attempting to abduct a young girl in Ecuador. He eventually confessed to his crimes and led authorities to the graves of 53 of his victims. He was convicted of murdering 110 girls in Ecuador and sentenced to life in prison. However, he was for some reason released from prison in 1994. After serving only 14 years due to apparent good behavior and Ecuador's maximum sentence law. He was deported to Colombia, where he was briefly held before being declared sane and released in 1998. Lopez's current whereabouts are unknown, and it is believed that he is still alive today, which has caused significant controversy and fear. The true extent of Lopez's crimes may never be known, but his actions have left a lasting impact on the families of his victims and the communities he terrorized, with his case highlighting the issues in the justice system in these countries.
John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy, often referred to as the Killer Clown, was responsible for the murders of at least 33 young men and boys. He was born on March 17, 1942 in Chicago, Illinois, and he had a pretty rough childhood. His alcoholic father was abusive, belittling, and physically assaulting Gacy. Despite these challenges, he sought out acceptance and respectability, joining community organizations and becoming a successful businessman. Gacy was known for his involvement in local politics and his charitable work, often dressing as Pogo the Clown to entertain children at parties and events. This public persona masked his dark, predatory nature, as he would lure his victims, often young men from the Chicago area, by offering them jobs or promising them money. Once they were in his home, he would give them alcohol or drugs, then handcuff and sexually assault them. Many of his victims were strangled or suffocated, and Gacy buried 26 of the bodies in the crawl space beneath his home. His crimes went unnoticed for several years due to how much of a respectable figure he was. However, in December 1978, Gacy's last victim, 15-year-old Robert Peist, went missing after being seen with Gacy. This led to a police investigation, and a search warrant was eventually issued at Gacy's home. The horrifying discovery of human remains in the crawl space led to his arrest. During his trial in 1980, Gacy confessed to the murders but pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. The jury found him guilty and he was sentenced to death, spending 14 years on death row where he would paint pictures of clowns. He was eventually executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. Ted Bundy, born on November 24, 1946, was one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. He had a troubled childhood. Despite his disturbed inner life, Bundy became a seemingly successful young man, attending college and law school, and working on political campaigns. He used this facade of normalcy to build trust with his victims, often faking injuries or pretending to be a figure of authority to get closer to them. He would also use his good looks and intelligence to lure women to their deaths. Between the years 1974 to 1978, it is believed that he had murdered at least 30 young women, though the true number may be even higher. His crimes spanned across several states, including Washington, Utah, Colorado, and Florida, involving abduction, sexual assaults, and even necrophilia. His motivations were deeply rooted in a desire for control and power over his victims, driven by sadistic sexual fantasies. His murders were not just about killing. They involved horrific violence, and he would often return to the bodies of his victims to further desecrate them. Bundy's capture came after several close encounters with law enforcement.
In 1975, he was arrested in Utah for a traffic violation, with the police linking him to a series of missing women. After escaping custody twice, Bundy was finally apprehended in Florida in 1978, and he was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to death. Bundy was executed in the electric chair in Florida on January 24, 1989. His case remains infamous due to his ability to manipulate those around him, hiding his monstrous nature behind a facade of charm and normality. Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman, also known as Dr. Death, was a British general practitioner who is believed to be one of the most prolific serial killers in history. Born on January 14, 1946, in Nottingham, England, Shipman had a seemingly normal upbringing, though his mother's death from cancer when he was 17 profoundly affected him. During her illness, he observed how morphine eased her suffering, which may have influenced his later behavior. As he became an adult, he became a well-respected doctor, practicing in Hyde, Greater Manchester. However, between 1975 to 1998, he secretly murdered about 250 patients, predominantly elderly women, by administering lethal doses of heroin. Shipman exploited the trust his patients had in him, even visiting them at home under the guise of providing care, then injecting them with the fatal drug. As a doctor, he was seen as a caretaker, making his murders even more insidious. His victims, who trusted him to safeguard their lives, were instead killed in cold blood. He would also falsify medical records to cover up his actions, and even altered wills to benefit himself in some cases. His motivations remain largely unclear, but some experts speculate that his mother's death and his perceived control over life and death may have played a role in his killings. Others believe he was driven by a god complex, seeking power over his victims' fates. He was eventually caught in 1998 after he forged the will of one of his victims, Kathleen Grundy, leading her daughter to suspect something was up. An investigation followed, uncovering the large amount of murders he had committed. In the year 2000, he was convicted of 15 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. He hanged himself in his prison cell in 2004, escaping justice for the full extent of his monstrous crimes.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer was an American serial killer and sex offender who committed the murder and dismemberment of 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. Born on May 21, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Dahmer's childhood was marked by a troubled home life and increasing social isolation. He developed disturbing fantasies early on, including an obsession with dead animals and dissection. He struggled with alcoholism and a growing desire for control and dominance over others. Dahmer would often lure his victims, primarily young men, to his apartment where he would drug, murder, and dismember them. His crimes involved necrophilia and cannibalism, and he often kept body parts as souvenirs. His inability to fully control his victims led to an escalation of violence and increasingly depraved acts. Dahmer's crimes went undetected for many years, partly due to his ability to appear unassuming and the marginalization of his victims, many of whom were from vulnerable communities. He was finally apprehended on July 22, 1991, when a victim escaped and led police back to his apartment, revealing the horrific scene within. Dahmer confessed to his crimes in chilling detail, providing insight into his disturbed mind. He was diagnosed with various mental disorders, but found legally sane and convicted of 15 counts of murder in Wisconsin in 1992, receiving 15 consecutive life sentences. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was murdered by a fellow inmate at Columbia Correctional Institution. Andrei Chikatilo. Andrei Chikatilo, known as the Butcher of Rostov, was born on October 16, 1936, in the Ukrainian SSR. His early life was not easy. He grew up during a famine in the Soviet Union, which led to tales of cannibalism in his village. His father was captured during World War II, and Chikatilo himself faced bullying due to his shy nature and physical weakness. These early experiences likely influenced his later violent tendencies. As he got older, he worked various jobs, eventually becoming a teacher. However, his inability to maintain discipline in the classroom and his inappropriate behavior towards students led to his dismissal. He later worked as a factory clerk, and despite his troubled behavior, he married and fathered 2 children, maintaining a facade of being a normal citizen. His killing spree began in 1978 and lasted until 1990. He targeted women and children, luring them to secluded areas where he would assault, mutilate, and murder them. His victims suffered horrific violence, including stabbing, dismemberment, and partial cannibalism. Chikatilo derived sexual gratification from the act of killing, which he later attributed to feeling little power in other aspects of his life. Because of this, he claimed that his crimes were driven by anger and sexual frustration. Despite being arrested multiple times during the investigation, Chikatilo evaded capture due to a lack of evidence and investigative errors. He was finally caught in November 1990 when undercover officers observed him approaching children at a train station. Forensic evidence, including blood and semen samples, linked him to several of the murders, and he eventually confessed to killing 56 people, but was only convicted of 52 murders in October 1992. Later that year, he was sentenced to death, and on February 14, 1994, Chikatilo was executed by a single gunshot to the head.